I could sense Alessandro freaking out right now.
Did you get it?
I have a lead on it. I think I know where I can get it, but guys, welcome to the first ever Beer Brackets of the Month episode. This is a big deal. The goal of this and what we want to do, if you all know the Beer Brackets concept by now, if you don't, you can go check out our intro video on the homepage of our YouTube channel. What we want to do here once a month on top of our regular review videos, we're going to be doing a Beer Bracket surprise episode where we're going to find 3 beers that we think are going to blow each other's minds, that we think maybe each other have not tried, or maybe they have tried, but it might be a fun surprise to get to see it again and talk about it. We're going to present them to each other one at a time. We're going to open our beer brackets, we're going to close our beer brackets, and we're going to have one in between. Alessandro, what are you drinking to start with?
That's a very good question, my friend. So I have decided to start today's episode of the Beer Bracket of the Month. Are you ready? Guys, we don't know what these beers are. Just want to clarify, we haven't talked about this. This is real, live.
This is an important thing to mention. None of this is decided beforehand. We don't know what the other person's going to be pulling out right now.
The first one is, here it is, my friend, Peroni Nastro Azzurro. And I picked this for 2 reasons. One is because I kind of wanted to go back to my roots and the first beers I've ever had in my life. And Peroni Nastro Azzurro is definitely one that in Italy is quite common. You'll find it almost everywhere. It's easily accessible also here in the States. Another fun thing about it is that the name of the beer, Peroni is the name of the brewing company. But Nastro Azzurro in Italian simply means blue ribbon.
Like Pabst Blue Ribbon?
Blue ribbon, yeah. So it's like PBR.
Is there a relation there? What's the blue ribbon connection?
So the blue ribbon connection, I was actually researching this, and this is fun. I didn't know this. Apparently, the brewery started in the 1800s, the beginning of the 1800s. In 1933, a big Italian cruise ship that was crossing the Atlantic Ocean got the nomination for being the fastest ship crossing, and it got the blue ribbon. So they made a beer to celebrate that, and they call it Peroni, which is the name of the brewery, Nastro Azzurro. And ever since, that name has stuck, with this specific brew. So yeah, that's why we have Peroni Nastro Azzurro.
So the funny thing about Peroni, the first time I ever tried it, do you remember the first time?
I do.
Do you think? Okay, so we met in Dublin. We were traveling in Ireland separately. We met together in a pub. We bonded over a pint of Guinness. After that, a couple of months later, I went back to meet him in Italy. We spent 24 hours in Rome. One night, we went to a restaurant, ordered a beer, and the 2 choices were Peroni and...
What was it, Moretti or...
Moretti, exactly. So the two main Italian beers. And I had to try, at that point, surprisingly, being an Italian from Canada, I had never tried either of these 2 beers. This is my first Peroni experience in Italy together. So that was one of the first beers that I think we bonded over at that point.
And that's exactly also one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it in, because honestly, Moretti and Peroni are probably the most 2 accessible beers that you have in Italy. I mean, they're everywhere. And, they're nothing crazy. But at the same time, I thought it would be a nice little touch to open this first episode of Beer Brackets, mentioning the fact that you're from Canada, you have Italian origins, and we were in Italy together. Somehow we got to re-experience this beer that was known to me, maybe a little bit less known to you, but at the same time, still a great beer, I think.
Okay, pour out your Guinness. We need to see the Peroni in action.
You're right, my friend. I'll... Cheers.
We had a pre-beer before opening the beer brackets. You see it on the table over here. A Blanc de Chambly from one of my favorite brewers in Chambly, Quebec. where I am from. I'm from Montreal. And Alessandro started himself off with a Guinness. Classic Guinness.
Here it is, yeah. But it's a little bit too advanced for a first episode, so we gotta keep it down. We'll start with opening the official beer brackets, at least for me, with the Peroni Nastro Azzurro. So let's get into it. And a little bonus, you see this little box here? This is the first beer cap that is going into it. Historic moment.
You can't even see it in there.
It's just tiny. It's right down there. It's the first one.
It's lost in the nether regions of that box.
Yeah, it's, see?
All right. Look, I know what Peroni tastes like. I'm sure a lot of people know what Peroni tastes like. Pour it out. Let's see it. Give me your first impressions, your first thoughts. Tell me what you think.
We're gonna pour it here together. Trying to do the best I can here on camera. So there we go. Nice head. You see how clear it is. Nice and crisp.
Is Peroni technically a lager, or is it a pilsner?
Yeah. Yes. I was looking on their website here before we started recording. They refer to it as a very light lager. And as you can see also from the color, I mean, it's almost like a pilsner. It's definitely a lager. I would go ahead and put it closer to a pilsner as style for the fact that it has a little bit of hoppiness. Really, the crispiness of this beer is absolutely amazing.
So, I gotta ask, as a young Alessandro growing up in northern Italy, was Peroni the first beer that you had?
That's actually not the first beer. The first beer was Moretti.
I have my own comparison to make with Moretti, which I think will come up in a later episode. Being from Montreal myself, I think I'm going to have to do a whole feature episode on Molson. What is Montreal known for except for Molson? And I compare Moretti to Molson Export. I think they're the exact same beer. I would not be surprised if behind the scenes, they are the exact same beer, just being branded separately and funneled into different bottles from the same stores. I have my theories about this.
I think you're bringing up a very important concept right there, and I think that it's absolutely possible.
Don't feed into my conspiracy theories.
But yeah, we should definitely do an episode about Moretti and Molson for sure. So, well, cheers, guys. So here's the first opening beer brackets.
I need to ask Alessandro, as he's taking his first sip here, why did you choose to open your brackets with Moretti? Because I think it's interesting, and you're going to find that I think we're a little bit on the opposite ends of the scale here in terms of which ones we chose to open and close the beer brackets. And I was hoping for this. I was hoping that it would turn out that we chose completely different styles to open and close.
Here's why I choose and why this is important to me, because it somehow represents, I grew up in Italy, it represents Italy, easily accessible in Italy that I've had many times back in the days. And I just wanted to bring it here on the channel to refresh it myself, but also introduce it back again to people that might not know about it. So, and we've had it together, so it's something that we could kind of talk about. But at the same time, I also thought it was important to mention my Italian roots here in this first beer bracket. Here's the thing, let me just say this, it's not really connected, but I was searching earlier on the Peroni website, and it's crazy how normally if you go on a beer website, the most focus is on the beers. I literally, and I'm still digging into trying to find where the beers are in the description. You can find the history, you can find, food pairings, you can find all sorts of things. This is classic Italian. Serious, man, there's not a menu for the beers. It's insane. Because I was digging into trying to say what exactly, what is the beer? What do they define it as?
One thing that's interesting, this might be applicable or not. The first day we arrived in Rome, we were starving, we needed a beer. It was maybe 12:30 p.m., so just right after the time where we felt it was probably acceptable to start drinking for the day. We went to this restaurant, a pizzeria. We go up, it was on the third floor, and there was nobody.
I do remember that. I do remember that, man.
There was nobody in this restaurant. We were the only two people in this place. And so all that we knew is that we wanted pizza and beer, because obviously the holy duo, the holy combination. We ordered our pizza. The guy asked us what we wanted to drink. We asked for beer. You tell me what you think, Alessandro. My experience in Italy was always that they're not the biggest beer drinkers necessarily as a whole. I'm sure there's enthusiasts like you, but my experience in the restaurants that we went into, it seems like more of a secondary beverage or something that's more of a specialty thing that some people drink. But you can tell me more what people are into, but I think it's more of a wine country than anything else. But when we asked for a beer, he didn't even ask us what kind we wanted. He's like, 2 beers, and he came back with 2 glasses, 2 little juice glasses of beer. Just standard generic beer without asking us what we wanted, and dropped it on the table in front of us. I think it was Peroni. I don't know.
You're hitting the nail right in the head right there, my friend. It's Italy's definitely a little bit more of a wine country than beer. Tradition is changing for sure, in the fact that there's a lot of interesting breweries, and I'm sure we'll get into that the more we, go through the episodes and start exploring. But yeah, no, I mean, if you go in just a random restaurants or bar, there's not going to be too much of a beer selection, especially if it's a restaurant and not a bar. A bar might have more on tap, but a restaurant usually has 1 beer on tap. It might have a couple of different bottles, but usually they're the same brand. They're kind of like, okay, you want beer? Here's the beer we have. That's pretty much how it goes.
By the way, if anybody's wondering why we're in completely different locations right now, well, Alessandro lives in the US now. He is from Italy. I'm in the north, still up in Canada. I'm originally from Montreal, but now currently living in Ontario and Toronto. So we're doing this remotely from now to do what we can. Eventually, we do have really big hopes for this, and we do have some really big dreams for this and what we want to be able to do. We do want to travel together. We do want to explore. We do want to have some really interesting interviews where we approach different brewers, different breweries, do some tours, talk to people about their beer making process, what their inspiration is, where their love for beer comes from, and give you guys some really interesting visual content to consume when it comes to that. For now, we're doing what we can, just like everybody else, with the pandemic that's going on. So we're starting small. Our beer review videos are going to be much more comprehensive. We're going to be looking at very specific beers, going into the history of the breweries, breaking down the beer, using our own custom rating system to determine how we're going to rate it on a score of 5. It is 5, correct?
Yeah, it's 5.
On a score of 5. Thank you very much. He's the analytics guy. He is the details guy. I think you'll find this moving forward. So for now, we're going to be doing it this way remotely. Him in Florida, me up here in Toronto for the time being. We're going to be doing the best we can, but as soon as we can, we're going to be opening this up. Ideally, we would love to be in the same place again. Alessandro and I have had beers together right now in 4 different countries to start with, which may not sound super impressive, but when you start to consider the distance between the countries, they're not all European countries. We've done the US, Canada, Ireland, and Italy, and for a while, every time we saw each other, it was in a different city.
I think actually we're still on that, because let me count. Like first time we met was in Dublin, and then we've been in Italy, and then the next time was in Montreal, Canada. Then we met in Florida, and then again in Canada, but in a different city, in Toronto. So I mean, that's pretty impressive. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but the main and most important thing is that I think that what we are trying to do is to put a focal point on the fact that it's not important what the ratings are and what people think, but what is important is what you like and what you enjoy. So we are just here to tell you about beers that you might not have had yet. Maybe you hear us talk about a beer and you really love it. Good, like you can go ahead, like go out and try and find it. Or maybe you hear us and say, nah, I'm not sure. Well, still, I'm going to say, like, if you find it, try it, because my opinion might be different than yours.
So one thing that I find that's interesting is that we went the complete opposite direction with our beer bracket choices. So Alessandro started with a really light lager. A little bit of a backstory, and hopefully we can find this for a future episode. When I went to visit Alessandro and his lovely wife in Florida last year, he knew my love for my hometown Unibroue brewery, and we got a mix pack, Unibroue. And one of the beers in there was black Forest cake. Excuse me, people, lovely people at Unibroue, if I got the exact name of the beer wrong, but basically it was to reproduce the flavors from a Black Forest cake.
Did you get it?
I have tried my best. This is a very limited edition beer from Unibroue. I have not been able to find it yet. And I can sense Alessandro freaking out right now because he thinks I've found it. I have a lead on it. I think I know where I can get it. But first cake beer, excuse me. Due to COVID being restricted where I am in the province of Ontario for the time being, I'm hoping next time I get to kick back to Quebec, I'll be able to get it. So maybe in a future episode, we'll see. But for now, I got the next best thing. Okay? This is... Oh! It is the Terrible by Unibroue. Another dark limited edition beer. 10.5% alcohol. It is dark. It is mean. It is stormy. It is strong. But it is delicious. And so I find that hilarious that you started. See, this goes to show the concept of the beer brackets and how fluid it is. How you started with Peroni, and I am going with the Terrible as my opening.
I cheer to that.
Let me open this baby up and let's pour it out and let's see how this looks. The good thing about Unibroue is that they're very inspired by Belgian style beers. This is modeled after a Belgian quadruple, a quadruple ale. So this is very much along the lines of other beautiful Belgian quadruples, which we will definitely get into in future episodes. In fact, our first review episode, which you've probably already seen on St. Bernardus, gets right into that. And this is Unibroue's take, so to speak. It is not quite our white whale, which is the Black Forest cake beer, which I will find again. But this is the next best thing, if you ask me. And let's pour this out. Oh, look at this. My God, it's delicious. And it doesn't quite have the notes. The beautiful thing about that Black Forest cake, and I'm sorry if it's not called exactly Black Forest cake. I think it was. But basically it took those elements of cherry and dark chocolate.
What was it? Black Gâteau?
Yes, Gâteau Noir. Or, it was the French...
I'll find it for you.
Please do. It was essentially the French translation of Black Forest cake. Okay, this has all the best elements of the Gâteau Noir. I'm going to wait for him to confirm that title so I don't make a fool of myself too much more.
Yeah, Forêt Noire.
Forêt Noire, Black Forest cakes of Forêt Noire, of course. It has all the best elements of that, and in fact, all the best elements of a lot of our other favorite quadruple Belgian style ales, like St. Bernardus, for example, where it's dark, it's flavorful, but it's complex, it's smooth, it's easy to drink. You would have no idea that this is 10.5% alcohol. You would never guess. It is so smooth. It is so pleasant to drink. There is zero aftertaste. There's actually maybe a second of a lingering, almost caramel-like aftertaste. But it's such a clean finish. It's so crisp. It's so delicious. I love Unibroue. You're going to be hearing a lot of them from me. In fact, Belgian style ales are my absolute favorite. Alessandro and I never shut up about these. And we're going to be going on a lot about these in our channel.
I do hate you right now. You know that, right?
I know you do. I know you do, my friend. And that is why I was so excited to bring this out. So, funny story. Being in Ontario, for anybody who might not be from Canada or from Eastern Canada, Unibroue is, of course, a fantastic brewery from Chambly, Quebec. So, north of Montreal. Their products are readily available all over Quebec. They do export throughout Canada, the US, and I'm sure internationally as well. In Ontario, it's a little bit harder to find very specific beers of theirs, especially the limited editions and the specialties. They're a little bit harder to find. In this case, I was lucky. I searched this. I did a whole scavenger hunt knowing that we were going to be doing these episodes. I went through the Liquor Commission of Ontario, the LCBO, their website, looking for the Unibroue Winter Pack, their winter variety pack. I found it. I found that it had this particular beer, which I was hoping it did have. I drove 25 minutes to get it, came back, and I have it for this video.
Dude, that's awesome. Like, I'm really jealous right now. I can just say that. That's an amazing beer. Like, enjoy it, please. All right, so, well, that was a nice touch, Joe, with your opening beer bracket. I love it. I wish I had one of these here with me right now. Since you're enjoying your delicious beer there, so I'm ready to move on to our middle beer, our number 2. So for number 2, I picked Carlsberg. Very simple with this first beer bracket because I want to go to some basic concepts. I wanted to bring in an Italian beer because that's kind of like where I first experienced beer, and then I wanted to bring also in a beer from Denmark because I'm actually half Italian and half Danish, so experienced beer in Denmark as well. And Carlsberg is, to me, worldwide, probably the most accessible and easy to find beer from Denmark. And I just wanted to, showcase that. I don't think we've had that together, but I'm sure you've had it before. So this is more like, since it's the middle beer, it's kind of like more of a, okay, we've opened the beer bracket, so at this point it's like whatever happens. This is just me bringing in a beer from my past that also brings in a little bit of my roots, and it's just a Danish Pilsner. Now, Carlsberg Brewery is interesting for a lot of reasons. They were one of the first breweries that actually introduced a lab that was studying actively beer to try to improve the process of making it. There was also a point in time where they were producing a specific strain of yeast, very good for lagers, that then they distribute just to anyone who wanted it, which is incredible thinking about the time. We're talking about the early 1800s. So it's something that a lot of times, like nowadays, is a little bit more common, and we'll get into that. But back in the days, it was not common at all. So they were really pioneers in that sense. I'll tell you this, my friend, I'm very surprised by your selection so far, and I can't wait to see number 2. But I'm also thinking, it's nice that we kind of went opposite direction. And this is just like how to show you how you can actually have fun with it. It doesn't matter what you pick, where you're going. It's going to be a fun experience regardless. So ready for the second cap going in there?
Put it in. Put it right in.
Oh, look at that. Did you hear that? Woo! So apparently they have a very unique beer cap that is supposed to eat the oxygen from inside of the beer bottle, which is important because oxygen is bad for beer. So they have this specific cap that is made specifically for that. So let's throw that in there too. And here's the pour.
There's the sexy pour angle.
Oh yes. And a little bit of head there. I'm going a little bit lighter, but still, and don't mistake like the fact that lighter doesn't mean less flavor necessarily. It just means like that the flavor is a little bit more subtle, which is, very good depending on what the situation is. Like I went from an Italian lager, Peroni, Nastro, Azzurro, to a Danish Pilsner, which are both lagers. We'll talk about what Pilsner is versus lager, but basically they're both in the same category, lagers. And you can see the color, it's a little bit darker than the other beer that I just had, like the Peroni Nastro Azzurro. And I can tell you flavor-wise, I would definitely say they're very similar, but there's huge differences, especially trying them back to back. So the Peroni is a little bit more crisp, a little bit more hoppy, while this one here has a little bit more of the malt sweetness. What is that? It's not as bitter, it's a little bit sweeter. So it's interesting how you can see, even with two beers that might seem like very close, actually have their differences. And this is also something we're going to be talking about in the episodes, like how to compare beers. Does it mean that this is good and that is bad? No, it's just like they're two different beers. I felt like opening with that first one there because it was bringing on like a little bit more of the crispiness and fresh. And this one here is transitioning into a little bit more sweet, a little bit more rich character, still being light.
Okay, so now that I've opened my beer brackets, we found out what Alessandro has as his opening bracket, what he has as his center beer, so to speak. We're going to find out what I have as my secondary beer on the night here. We've already seen how we're kind of opposites. He started with the Lagered to the Pilsner. I've gone from a Belgian quadruple. Where am I going to go from here in the night? And we have a local beer to Ontario here, Henderson Brewery, their food truck ale. Now, this is a really, really interesting beer. Henderson Brewery is located here where I am currently in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. They have Henderson's Best, which is their standard, their most common, but they also have their food truck beer, which you can find anywhere. And if I'm not mistaken, Alessandro, you tried this one night where we had the cabin that we rented together.
I was going, yes, I did.
The reason why I love this, and it's so unique to me in the sense that they call it a Lagered blonde. It's a little more flavorful, it has a little more body to it. It's a little darker, and you'll see as I pour it out here. Traditionally, when you think of a lager, you think of something that's a little bit more yellow in color. You think of something that's a little bit more transparent, that doesn't have as much body to it. It's not as cloudy. That's actually the perfect pour right there. Look at that, I'm really proud of myself. It does have a kind of orangey amber color to it. It has a really thick head, and it's very, very flavorful, but very smooth at the same time. In terms, Ontario has tons of amazing microbreweries. Quebec microbreweries are number one in my heart, and they always will be. Ontario does have a wonderful array of microbreweries, though. Henderson being, I wouldn't call them a microbrewery necessarily, because they do have quite impressive distribution. You can find them almost anywhere in any of the major government liquor stores, like the LCBO. But their food truck ale is one of their best, in my personal opinion. What I like about this is that it still has, it's not light necessarily. Technically, it is 4.8% alcohol, so it's just under 5. But it does, you can tell by the color, by the transparency, the opacity on it. It looks like it has some flavor to it, like it has some bite, and it does. It's smooth, but at the same time, it's very, very, very flavorful. You can taste the malts, you can taste the hops, but it's a light, easy drinking beer at the same time, and I've always appreciated this one. Henderson Food Truck. Interesting story behind this beer as well. This was created by Henderson, or so they say, because Toronto has a very vibrant food truck culture. And so they wanted to create a beer that wasn't just super, super light and flavorless. They wanted to create something that was easy to drink, but something that had a good, strong flavor to it at the same time that would pair well with the most amount of foods possible. So if you have gathering of food trucks going on, if you have a little food truck festival happening in your area, you can get a Henderson's Lagered Blonde food truck ale, and it'll pair with the most amount of foods possible. And that was their goal. And that's why you get these different sort of flavor elements to it, these different aromas.
That's such a great concept.
It tastes very smoky, but at the same time, it has an incredible mouthfeel. There's not an overpowering aftertaste. There's more of an aftertaste, surprisingly, than my first one, than the Belgian quadruple. There's much more of an aftertaste than on the Unibroue, but it's not a bad thing. Aftertaste in this case is a very, very good thing.
Do you find it more sweet or more bitter in the aftertaste?
Interesting enough, it's not bitter or sweet at all. It's somewhere in between. And I wish I could let you try this right now, Alessandro, because it's very, very interesting.
I do remember it, and it would be interesting to try it. Because I started from a little bit lighter. Try that after these two and see the differences, because it's incredible like how much of a difference I could pick up between the Peroni and the Carlsberg. Because honestly, this is the first time I've had them back to back. I've never had like any other chance to try them back to back. So I'm sure like having a beer like that now would really probably bring out more of the differences. And I think like it's interesting that you're describing it as a little bit smoky, which I think that's the type of flavor that I love. So having that like flavor in it like sounds like delicious.
It has an amazing amount of flavor, but it's so light and so clean at the same time. That's why it's my number 2. We start with the heaviness. We go from 10.5 and we move on down to something that's 4.8. Still with some body, still with some flavor. I'm a flavor guy. I'm a body guy. I need something in there that has some bite to it. Not to disparage anything else by any means. Everything is subjective, especially when it comes to beers. But this goes to show it's interesting the differences that Alessandro and I have had in our beer brackets today. But this is the middle ground for me. So we'll see what my closing bracket is for the night.
I really like the way you described the beer. It sounds like it's a beer that has a lot of complexity. And, I tried it once, and I'm not sure at what point of the night we tried it, so I don't remember it quite well. The way you described it makes me think I really want to try it again.
So, closing out the beer brackets now. So we saw how Alessandro has gone with the lighter route. We're still going to find out how he's going to close out his beer brackets. I am going to close out mine right now, and I am going to do it specifically with something that, for anybody from Quebec, for anybody from Montreal, this beer is iconic. Specifically for Alessandro himself. Alessandro came to visit me in my hometown of Montreal one year, and I brought him to different places that I used to frequent back when I was, young and kind of hitting the town. And one of the beers that I had him try in one spot was a Montreal/Quebec classic, which is Labatt 50, which anybody from Montreal is very familiar with Labatt 50. This is the classic Quebec ale. And an interesting thing about Labatt, they are actually a Belgian-owned brewery that is now, specifically, it always goes back to Belgium with me. Lately, Belgium has kind of been the beer of choice. And it's funny that this is my home province of Quebec, my hometown of Montreal. The Labatt turns out to be a Belgian-owned brewery, which I didn't know until I was actually doing research for this episode. They are based in Toronto, but the Labatt 50 itself is something that was made specifically for Quebec. Labatt 50 was the best selling beer in Canada. Whoa!
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Woo! This was the best selling beer in Canada until 1979. Woo, look at that. I'm just going to let that seep in.
What happened in 1980? That's a delicious beer.
This was the first light ale ever introduced in Canada. This beer has history. Alessandro and I first tried this beer. I brought him around. We went to a different bar. Anybody who's from Montreal, we went to Fofon Electric. Spent an afternoon there, sitting on a terrace, and got him a nice bottle of Labatt 50 to welcome him to Montreal. And so it has some sentimental value. It is a fantastic beer bracket closer. If you're looking for something to be your closing bracket for the evening, there is nothing better than Labatt 50. It is the epitome of a light ale. So that's easy drinking, that's flavorful, something that hits the spot, that isn't too heavy. It is the perfect end of night beer. in my opinion. And this is why I chose this as my closing bracket.
Man, like I think you did a great job right there. You got the perfect way of closing. Like I do remember that beer. Being in Montreal and experiencing that beer together, I felt like that was a way of connecting. The same way we kind of started, and that's funny. Like we kind of went two opposite direction. I started with the Peroni, which is the beer that we had together in Rome. And then you're closing here with the Labatt 50, which we had together in Montreal. So it's a way of introducing each other to the culture of different countries and bonding with beer. And that's like the power of what beer brackets are. Like you really can bond with beer across different countries. And even, without knowing each other, it's just fun to just sit down and have a beer together, which is awesome. So cheers, my friend.
Cheers, my friend. And anybody from Montreal or from Quebec in general, or even, I was in Ontario and I was able to find this. Labatt 50 is actually becoming a bit of a trendy beer right now. Back home in Quebec. Labatt is actually the largest brewer in Canada. But the fact that they were the first to introduce a light ale like this is very, very impressive that it's lasted the test of time. 50, can't get any better than this. I think there's nothing better to have a nightcap at the end of the night. And this is what I choose to close my beer brackets with.
Well, cheers, my friend, and get ready because I have to close my beer brackets now. So it's my turn. With this one, I went with the beer that we didn't, or at least not that I remember. I don't think we've had it together, but it's more to represent where we met and also to represent a different style and something that most people don't necessarily think when they think about that country. What I picked is actually this beer. Smithwick Red Ale.
Okay, how did you pronounce that?
Smithwicks.
I went to the bar one night and I went and I ordered one of those and I called it a Smithwick's and the guy laughed at me. And actually the guy next to me at the bar laughed at me too. It's like, it's a Smithwick's. Smithwick's. You don't pronounce like the W is a little bit silent there.
Smithwick. Well, I just say it like the way I pronounce my broken English here. Smithwick's.
That's how I said it too, but apparently not, so now we know.
Well, let's see, that's another... You've had it before?
I've definitely had it before, yeah. I've had it in a can. I've also had it on tap. Actually, in Ireland, I've had it a couple of times.
That's same to me. Like, I've had it before in Italy, here in the US, and I've had it on tap in Ireland. I don't think we've had it together, but it's a beer that I think it's not getting enough attention because I think it's an excellent beer. It actually has like a lot of history. I don't want to get too complicated today. Like we're just having a casual chat here. Smithwick started in the 1700s, so it actually has like a very long history. And I think that it was nice to kind of pay tribute to Ireland because that's where we met and that's where we had our first beer together. Where we first opened our beer brackets together. So it's a beer that I'm sure a lot of people have had before. It's not difficult to access, but I love it. I think it's delicious. So I thought that was a good way to close the beer bracket. So let's crack it open. Let's throw. See, 3. It looks so much more crowded now. Not really, but it's okay. And look at that, like that's the way I like to close the beer brackets. We're going a little bit higher here in richness. And there it is, to the last drop.
It's a lot darker than I remembered it being. It looks a lot fuller.
It definitely has a little more of a rich color
So how would you describe it? What type of beer is Smithwick exactly? Is it an amber ale? Is it?
It's definitely an ale. So we've moved, at least for me, from lager to ale, which are the two big families. We have lagers and ales. When you're talking about beer, the first question you should ask, is it a lager or is it an ale? That's your first big differentiating factor. So we're moving into ales. Ales are top fermented, so they tend to be a little bit richer in character. And you can also see it just strictly by the color, right? Like it looks a little bit richer. Like the first two, actually, you only had ales tonight, Joe. Like you didn't have any lagers, right?
I have not had any lagers, no. I've had a quadruple Belgian ale. I've had a Labatt 50, which is an ale as well. And actually the Henderson, the food truck, is a lager. It's technically a lagered blonde, as they describe it. But if you're going to equate it closer to a lager or Pilsner and ale, it's technically a lager. So I've had one.
You had one, so sorry about that. But so the difference is that the fermentation and the type of yeast that is used in the process. And we'll get into this, but ales are fermented using a different type of yeast. So the richness and the type of flavor that comes through, it's different compared to the lagers. That's why I wanted to end with this one. But yeah, aroma-wise, you do get a little bit more rich maltiness here compared to the other two that I've had. As you can see, like it's a little bit darker in color. That's why it's also referred to as a red ale. You can see the color clearly. I mean, taste-wise, it really has a little bit more of a presence. It's a little bit more malty. Not quite hops are there, but they're more there to balance. They're not so strong as much as in the other two. And percentage-wise, it's not particularly high. It's 4.5, so we're still sticking to the same level of the other two, but the richness of this beer, the finish of this beer, which is something we're going to be talking about, is incredibly rich. It has like a lot of dark roasted flavors. It has a little bit of hop, but just barely in the end. It's malty rich. It has like this roasted flavor on the edge. It's delicious. It's just like a perfect beer, in my opinion, to finish this first beer bracket that we're having all together, just to close up the event or the evening.
Guys, that wraps up our beer bracket of the month, our first ever beer bracket of the month episode. We opened our brackets, middle ground beer. We closed our brackets. I hope you guys had a good time as us going through this. We're doing our best to communicate this way, but I'm sure a lot of you are having the same issues too. Speaking with friends, whether it's through Zoom or FaceTime, whatever it is. However you guys are communicating with each other, having beers with each other, having drinks, socializing, keeping in touch with each other virtually. We're doing the same right now. Hopefully, eventually, when this is all over, we're going to be able to take it to another level, be in the same place, be able to interact with each other the way we want to be able to make the kind of videos we want to. For now, we're going to do the best that we can when we're all in these restricted situations, and we're all limited in what we can do and where we can travel. I hope you had a good time going through the beer brackets with us, as much fun as we did. Alessandro, any closing words?
That's awesome what you said, Joe, right there. All I can add is just think about, how much, even during these difficult times, with COVID, even if you can't really leave your house, and for us it's a little bit more difficult because we even live in different countries, but still, the beer bracket power is able to bring us all together and have us enjoy beers. So that's what's important right here. Like, we're having a beer together. It doesn't matter where we are. Obviously, we would love to have beers together, to be able to discuss the same beer, have the same live reaction that we would like to. Don't stop seeing your friends just because you can't see them in real life. Like, still enjoy beers with them. This is just an example, and maybe we can inspire you, give you some ideas. So keep following us and see what we can come up with. As soon as we can start traveling and going to breweries, we're going to go visit breweries. We're going to go interview brewers. Stick around and see what's coming up. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody. Don't forget to close the brackets.
That's very important. Do not forget to close the beer brackets.